This Dharma talk was given by Rose Martin. Rose is lay ordained and is a senior student of Sunyana Graef Roshi, who is the founder and abbot of the Vermont Zen Center. Rose is also the head of the Zendo at Endless Path Zendo in Rochester, New York.
So, as you all know, I left on February 6th for India and returned on the 24th, and in the middle, hard to quantify what happened in the middle, but to sum up, the 55 pilgrims who returned from India were unremarkable, except for the invisible, glistening thread binding them for all time to Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. It's really, it sums it all up, but to expand on that, there's a quote from the Buddha himself who said, "There are 4 places the sight of which will arouse strong emotions in those with faith. Here the Tathagata was born. Here the Tathagata attained enlightenment. Here the Tathagata set in motion the wheel of the Dharma. Here the Tathagata attained final nirvana, and the person who has faith should visit these places." I suppose you start with faith, but there's also the fact of going to these places also deepens one's faith. I have some friends who for the last several years have been living in an Airstream and traveling around the country, and what they've done, besides seeing, beautiful places, the national parks and, various geographic places, they've gone and firsthand gone to places that embodied the history of this country, places connected with the Civil War, places connected with civil rights actions, places connected with the revolution. And it brought those things to life for them. And that's what I felt about all the places that we visited. Obviously there's a distance, and especially because we're either maybe first or second generation of Americans to be practicing Buddhism. It sometimes feels like, we know there are ancestors, we know we come from a lineage, but it still sometimes feels like you're making it up because it's so new. And to go to these places, to walk literally in the footsteps of the Buddha, walk those dusty roads that he walked, helps to make our practice, the practice that we're all attempting to do here, makes it authentic. It really feels like we're embodying a reality that's so ancient that it's so ancient that it's real. I don't know how else to put it. The Buddha himself, came out of an ancient India, steeped in Hinduism and Jainism. And actually, we hear from our guides that Modi, the Prime Minister of India, is a great supporter of Buddhism, in part because Buddha is considered the 9th incarnation of Vishnu. So he's seen in a larger context, and in a lot of the places that we went, there were many Hindus, practitioners of Hinduism, making offerings, just showing their respect for the Buddha, as one of the pantheon of Hindu gods. The other thing I want to say is that, you can't go and see the sights of the Buddha's life without obviously having the experience of India. And I don't know if this is going to work because I didn't know how to share what I have on my phone with the computer. So I'm just going to hold this up and see if we can. You see some pilgrims there in their brown robes. So we were in India at a time when there was a celebration of spring, and specifically ceremonies connected with the goddess Sarasvati, who is the goddess of learning and knowledge. And there were huge tents set up in different places in many of the villages and the small cities that we were in, where thousands of people went to for whatever the ceremonies were. And one of the interesting aspects of that, when we saw all these people streaming out of these tents, Roshi Graef, when we were at Vulture Peak and chanting parts of the Lotus Sutra, there's, in the end, it says something about, and all the people, 84,000 strong, cherished the longing for supreme enlightenment with which nothing can compare. And it was not hard to imagine that saying 84,000 people was not an imaginary number. It was not, some large number that, so many people. There was a real possibility that there were 84,000 people in that space when the Buddha was teaching. There are a lot of people in India. And what's interesting too is that, for the most part, I was thinking about this, for the most part, all the women that we saw, the Indian women, were saris. They were riding side saddle on the backs of motor scooters in their saris. They were working in the fields that they were tending, and we saw a lot of agriculture on the buses as we were driving. And the women working in the fields were wearing their saris and, picking seeds or planting seeds. There are parts of India that have not changed for eons, really, for eons. And that also steeps you in the history, the reality of the history of where we were. And it's also interesting, the Buddha says, there are these 4 specific sites where he was born, where he came to enlightenment, where he taught, and where he died. And those sites for a long time were rubble, really. It was only, I think I wrote that down somewhere in the 70s, uh, that Kapilavastu, which is, where the Buddha's family, where his palace was unearthed. The Indian Archaeological Institute Society has done a lot of work recently, really within the last 50 years. But before that, people who tried to find these places, there wasn't that much to see. And so now those sites, those 4 specific sites, have been developed, and there's a real kind of theme park atmosphere to them. There's a lot of shops. There are temples from various Southeast Asian countries there, and the presence of a lot of Southeast Asian monks from Sri Lanka, from Thailand, from Burma. But the temples are from Korea, from Tibet, from French Vajrayana practitioners, from Japan. There are 2 Japanese temples at Bodh Gaya. So there's like a lot of places to visit, and you're always kind of running the gauntlet between all these. There's not only shops, but people coming up to you, persisting in following you and saying, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this. So it was, for me, the places that had the deepest impact were not those specific places, but places that had a deep spaciousness and quiet. The other thing is that when we did this pilgrimage, it was not done in like historical order. It was done in geographic order. So sometimes it was hard to know where we were or when we were. Also, a lot of you know that I tested positive for COVID on like the 5th day of the pilgrimage. And so I think a lot of things got a little fuzzy. But that said, those places, specifically, the first place we visited was the Jetavana Grove, because it was on the way to, the other places we were going. And for those who do not know, Jetavana, it was named for Prince Jeta, who was the prince of that particular principality in India. The layman, Anathapindika, he was a merchant of some wealth, met the Buddha and wanted to establish a place for the Buddha to come, especially during the rainy seasons. And this was a beautiful, beautiful place that was owned by Prince Jeta, and Anathapindika asked him if he could buy it. And the prince said, well, sure, but the cost of it will be, you need to cover all the area of the park with gold. So the Anathapindika started doing this, and the prince was so impressed that he said, oh, never mind, he would take that much gold, but you don't have to do the whole thing. I'm going to donate the rest of this place to the Buddha. And so the Buddha spent 25 rainy seasons in that place. So it was really steeped in the practice and in his teachings. There's a tree in that place that supposedly, historically, was planted by Ananda, the Buddha's cousin and the recorder of the Buddha's teachings, which became some of the sutras, planted from a seed of the Bodhi tree under which the Buddha attained enlightenment in Bodh Gaya. So he planted it there in Jetavana, and it's still there. And, just walking there and doing zazen in that place. I mean, imagine you're doing zazen in the place where 2,600 years ago, people were doing zazen. That's what they were doing. They were making the same efforts that we have all tried to make to make the Buddha's teachings a reality, to realize, impermanence, and to realize the mistaken perception we have of this encapsulated self. This has been ongoing. And it makes, again, as I said, it makes our own practice feel authentic. We're not just making something up. We are really deeply embedded in a practice that I think, this is just my opinion, really has helped individuals and larger entities, helped us live with greater peace and kindness and happiness. It's a real gift, a real true teaching. So the Jetavana Grove was a place that I felt a real connection with. The other place that has not been developed because it is so inaccessible is Vulture Peak, which is in the city of Rajgir, and it's surrounded by these 5 hills, and so it's kind of insulated and isolated. And we climbed up to Vulture Peak at sunrise and waited for a group that was already there to finish their ceremonies and their sittings. And then we took our place at the altar that's been created there, and Roshi Graef gave Jukai. So we formally, once again, entered into the Buddha's family and took refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in that place. They're also just below the pinnacle of the particular hill that Vulture Peak is situated on. Just below there are purportedly the caves in which Mahakashyapa and Moggallana did zazen, did their practice. It was really quite a, and this was, I actually did have COVID while we were doing this. According to Roshi Graef, who had her little Fitbit with her, we climbed 82 flights of stairs to get to the top. For some people, that was not a possibility. And so there were palanquins, literally, things that you sat in, that were hoisted on poles by 2 guys, one at the front, one at the back, and the people who couldn't walk were carried up by these guys in flip-flops to the top of Vulture Peak. So everybody who was on pilgrimage did get to be there. And of course, Vulture Peak was a place where the Buddha passed, well, passed his robe and bowl to Mahakashyapa. So it really, again, this whole sense of inheritance of what we've inherited, was really strongly felt in that place. I'm trying to think about other places where, one thing I would like to say too, is in Shravasti, which is the place where the Jetavana Grove was located, we stayed in a hotel, and I read the little brochure about the hotel and the owners of a chain of hotels that are in that area, and their last name is Shakya. So there's still a lineage. It's the Buddha coming from, being the prince of the Shakya clan. I didn't ask because there was nobody at the hotel actually who was directly connected to the family. I didn't ask if, they had any relation to Siddhartha at all. I'm just looking. Yeah, the other place actually that was not developed at all was in Vaisali, which is the place where the Vimalakirti Sutra takes place. It was the home of the Lichavis, and it's not far from Srinagar, where the Buddha passed into nirvana. And in that place, that's also the place where I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Buddha ordained his stepmother, Mahaprajapati, as the first nun in his order. Prajapati and her 500, the 500 other women who had accompanied her, following the Buddha and asking him repeatedly to be ordained, and he finally did accept women into the order in Vaisali. One of the other reasons that I think Jetavana felt so deeply connected there. The layman Anathapindika asked the Buddha at one point, he said, so, do we have to be monks in order to practice your teachings? And the Buddha was very clear that one does not have to be a home leaver to practice sincerely and attain deep realization. This is also, very moving to know for all of us who are practicing sincerely the Buddha's teachings and embodying them to the best of our ability, and who either are not called to or feel no connection with, have no affinity with, and may be confused by the existence of places that have residential training and feel that maybe somehow practicing as a householder is not authentic. The Buddha, in his own words, said, one does not have to be a home leaver. One can practice deeply, realize deeply as a householder. And I think that's really important to take in and to not forget, and to help us validate the practice that we do every day. I'm just looking to make sure, okay, nobody has any questions. So the places that we went include Shravasti, where we went first to the Jetavana Grove, and then I have to look at, by the way, we also went, I think because our host, well, the founder of BuddhaPath.com, Shantam Seth, is a disciple of Thich Nhat Hanh's, and Buddha Path was founded, I think, in part to provide pilgrimage tours for disciples and followers of Thich Nhat Hanh and people in Plum Village. As a matter of fact, while we were on pilgrimage, Shantam himself was leading a pilgrimage of people from Plum Village. And I'm not sure if you all know, Plum Village is the seat in France of Thich Nhat Hanh's community. So because also Shantam is Indian, he wanted to share with us a little bit of India. And so before we set out on the formal pilgrimage, we visited the last place that Gandhi lived, and where he was, the place where he was assassinated, which was actually also more moving than I expected. You know, Gandhi really does embody India and a vision for India that is still alive in places and in people in India. Then we also went to see, because you're in India, you have to see the Taj Mahal, right? And it's stupendous. It's really, the photos, whatever, just don't do it justice. I mean, it's humongous. It's monolithic. That place, I'll get to you, Deborah, and the Ajanta and Ellora caves, which are these man-made monuments. It's just, it's staggering, really, to think that humans created these things. So yeah, Deborah, you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, Rose. I just wanted to add, we went on with Shantam, the pilgrimage many years ago, and a couple of things to add. One was at the Gandhi, that grove, that place. I remember that they had in a room all of his last material possessions. They were rimless glasses. Wasn't there a cane?
Yeah,
And maybe a pair of shoes or slippers?
And his spinning wheel.
And that was everything that he owned.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was Patna. I believe it's in Patna, and the museum there, where they have a tiny urn of the Buddha's ashes. And evidently there's about 8 places where they have his ashes, and that was mind-boggling.
Well, yeah, there was a place we went to where they're building a new stupa, in which I guess the remains are in a museum in Patna, and they will be interring them in this stupa. Yeah, so after the Buddha died and he was cremated, his remains were divided among the various families that were there and were taken to the Lichavis, the Mallas, the Shakyas. These were all little kingdoms, but deeply religious. Deeply devoted followers of the Buddha, and so they each got some remains or some pieces. I don't know if it was only ashes or if it was other belongings of the Buddha, and they were placed in different places. And the other thing, to just jump around, in a lot of these places, King Ashoka, or the Emperor Ashoka, I guess he was, of India, after his conversion to Buddhism, after he was shaken to the core by the carnage that he saw around him at the end of his final battle, he became a follower of the Buddha and went to these pilgrimage sites and erected huge stone pillars that are topped with these lions that represent the Buddha and also represent Ashoka. A lot of these pillars also were rubble for quite a long time, until they were excavated and found. I'm not sure by whom. Sometimes the British. Actually, the British, for some reason, were interested in the history of India, in the history of their lovely colony. And so they did, and I think, that's just who they were. They were historical. They were interested in history and explored the history of India. So, yeah.
Could you speak about Angulimala and Sravasti?
Well, I was thinking, if people didn't, no, at Sravasti.
And Bodhgaya, when you get to
Oh, yeah. Angulimala at Bodh Gaya? No.
Just,
Yeah, I'll get to Bodh Gaya. Oh, do we have how are we doing for time?
yeah.
Oh, well, I was going to say, at Jetavana too, there is a stupa for Anathapindika, the person, who founded the Jetavana Grove, and there's a stupa for Angulimala. But if you don't know about Angulimala, actually, Roshi Teisho last week, so I didn't want to say any more about that, except for the fact that the teaching of his life, if you're not familiar with his story, please listen to Roshi's Teisho. But what you come away with is, number one, don't do everything just because your teacher tells you. Really, really, and the Buddha said this himself, be a lamp unto yourself, look within, make sure what you're doing makes sense to you, is logical and good. And number two, no matter how badly you think you've behaved and what terrible acts you may have done in this lifetime or any lifetime, no one is irredeemable. No one. It's a very inspiring story. Yeah. Okay.
And you saw a stupa connected with Angulimala.
Yeah, there
it's
was
not
a
just
stupa.
a story.
Right. Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
All these places exist. These people existed. What are stories, that we read about in our minds? As I said, we walked there, we sat at Vulture Peak, and
But even something
we're in the presence,
as
really
wild as
in the
Angulimala was real.
Yeah, it was real. Well, it was real. So I'm just gonna, so the other places that we went, yeah, okay, well, let's skip to Bodh Gaya because we don't have that much time. But I have to say, so Kushinagar, right, we went to Kapilavastu, which was the seat of his father's kingdom. We went to Lumbini, where the Buddha was born, and again, there were a lot of people, and it's one of those things that you kind of get shunted through these sacred spaces, but you don't have a lot of time to just inhale the atmosphere because you have to leave. There are a lot of people coming through. We went to Kushinagar, where the Buddha attained parinirvana. And there's a huge long statue of the Buddha, and again, there's in all these places, I have to say, we were pilgrims. We didn't just go, oh, that's nice. We chanted, we circumambulated, we read stories related to the Buddha's birth, to the Buddha's parinirvana, to various aspects of the Buddha's life and his sutras. And as I said, we went to Rajgir. So then towards the end of the trip, we spent 2 days in Bodh Gaya. And in that place, we did a ceremony of the Buddha's enlightenment, which, is pretty remarkable to sit under the tree. One of the things that we could not, one person had a camera, but the rest of us, we could not bring our iPhones into that place. It was very, very strict security. So I have no pictures except in here of where we sat and who else was there. There's one temple there. There's a huge, the Mahabodhi temple. I don't know when it was built, but it's another one of these monolithic things that you can't believe anybody human actually created, but they did. So a little place that we're shunted through. But there are what's interesting also at Bodh Gaya, it's like a tent city. There are a lot of monks who just live there for, I don't know, various lengths of time and practice and sit. There's big Tibetan Buddhist presence. They have like their own little platform where they're chanting, but there's also, in the morning, we got there when it first opened, and we thought we'd be really early, but there were already thousands of people there before us. So there's Burmese, I believe, chanting over the loudspeakers, and fortunately that ended at some point so that we could have our ceremony of the Buddha's enlightenment without the loudspeakers. But yeah, it's like a little tent city. There are people who come and just stay there. One of the beautiful moments when we were leaving Bodh Gaya was right in front of that temple. There was a group of like 4 young girls who were leading a chanting service. They were like, I don't know, maybe 12, 13, 14 in some red garments. I have no idea where they were from, but it was really nice to see them being given the opportunity to lead that service. A lot of the time in Bodh Gaya was formal, but after dinner one night, a group of us just went there on our own and sat, under the tree. And then myself and one of my friends there's a kind of a raised area above the tree that kind of surrounds the lower part where the people are doing services, and you can kind of do a circumambulation. And so we did that and offered incense and collected some leaves from the bo tree. But it was nice to have some informal moments, some sort of personal moments that were not necessarily connected with all the pilgrims. If you see pictures of us, we were really a force to be reckoned with. I mean, we'd come in, it's like a swarm of locusts, we'd actually, in a restaurant, we'd go through, eat all the food. By the way, Indian food, morning, noon, and night. So you gotta love it, because if you don't, there wasn't that much other choice. But it was great. It was good food, very, very healthy, actually. Everyone could notice us because either we were in our brown robes at the sites where we went to formally, or we were in these really bright turquoise t-shirts, so that we could find each other in case we got separated. People noticed us, and they wanted to know who we were, where we were from, what we were doing. They wanted to take their picture with us as if we were some, noted celebrities. It was really funny. I don't know. People all over the world now have my picture on their phone. I have no idea why.
You were a strange cult,
Yeah, we were kind of like a... and after Bodh Gaya, and one of the things we did just before getting to Bodh Gaya, outside of Bodh Gaya in a little village, it's actually Gaya. Bodh Gaya is the place where, the Buddha attained enlightenment, but Gaya is a village nearby, and there is a stupa and a temple devoted to Sujata, who brought the Buddha, who made the offering of rice milk to the Buddha when he finally realized he was going down the wrong road, trying to get enlightenment by these severe ascetic practices that would only lead to his death. And there she was. He was, sitting under a tree, and she thought he was the manifestation of the god of the tree, to whom she brought regular offerings. And so there he was, and so she made her offering to him, and he accepted it, and the rest is history. But it was nice to have it was nice to have the places associated with the women in the Buddha's life that were part of the pilgrimage. For me, it was nice. So after Bodh Gaya, we actually got on a plane and flew to Western India, to the Ajanta and Ellora caves. The Ajanta caves are, unbelievable. They were chiseled out of basalt, lava, rock, with steel, according to our guide, steel chisels. That India of the 2nd century had steel, and they're vast caverns and huge sculptures. And in Ajanta, it's well known, there are paintings on the walls of many of the Buddha's past lives, of Jataka stories that are painted throughout the caves. And Ellora is nearby. It's another little bus ride. By the way, hours and hours and hours and hours on the bus. But would I do it again? Yes. If I could, I would. Elora, too. I mean, these places, yeah, they're beyond your imagination. You have to, look them up, Google them, whatever. I mean, you'll only see things like this, but they're huge. They're vast. These vaulted caverns chiseled out of not sedimentary rock, not something that's easy to chisel out, but really hard rock. Could anyone do that today? I don't know. What it takes. The artists who painted, there are sutras, not Buddhist sutras, but official teachings telling painters how to paint, how to show, like various angles of the body, how to do shading, this was an art that was a science. It was really quite remarkable when you think, and I know our guides were very proud of India's history and heritage, but when you think of how detailed and subtle the instructions were for the time, 2,000 years ago, it really is beyond belief for me. I find it, well, India, as one of our guides said, it is a place of contradiction. It's unimaginary and yet it's so real. And one of the things that I haven't mentioned, and I guess part of the reality of India is the poverty that's in your face, literally. As you walk down the street, the streets are lined with children begging, mothers holding infants begging, people in various deformed, crippled bodily states begging. We were told to not even make eye contact with those people, but to take out of one pocket the money that you would possibly be giving to these people, put it in another pocket, and when we got to the end of our trip, to find a place, and we were told about a couple of places, to donate that money that would hopefully, I'm hoping, do some good and be able to affect and change the lives of the people who were on the street. In part, also, it's a phenomenon associated with the tourism. There, it seems, was not a lot of begging in quite the droves that you see it now, as there is now with all the foreign visitors and the money coming in. And I know we were told the local merchants are not happy and actually do shoo people away. I don't know the reality of those people's lives, and there was certainly one person on our trip for whom it was incredibly hard not to just bend down and talk to the children and say, "How are you? Who are you? What do you do?" But we couldn't do that, and that was also part of the pilgrimage. So I didn't want to leave that out. But I think we basically have come to the end of our time. I don't know if you have any other questions or if that was enough for all of you. But I guess I want to end by saying I'm really grateful to to Roshi for understanding that this was something I needed to do. And I still don't really know, why yet, but I needed to do it for all the people who went before and who actually found these places and developed them, to Shantam, who made our pilgrimage as easy as possible for pilgrims, first class pilgrims we were. To all the people who were on the pilgrimage with me, it was really a wonderful thing to share this experience with 54 of my best friends, so, yeah, thank you. And to share it with you. Yeah.
Stop recording. We can do our great vows to all. Thank you very much, Rose.